Proper recognition for the 150 or so people buried in unmarked graves at the old leper colony off the coast of Darwin. Decades after its closure, asbestos is finally being cleared from the site and calls are growing for a permanent memorial to be built. Letitia Lemke got rare access to the area for Australia-wide.
Like many things done to Aboriginal people, we do owe them an apology for what was done to them in Channel Island.
It was a prison. It might be nicely classified as a lazaret, but when you were sent there, you were incarcerated. And if you escaped, you were hunted up, rounded up and sent back.
Broken families and stolen generations. These women are still living with the unintended consequences of the Commonwealth leper colony.
Those were the places where people who had leprosy were sent. If there were babies born on Channel Island, they were taken away from their mothers and sent to another place to be reared far away from their mothers.
Kampule Jabani was a child when she was sent to Channel Island. Housed in children's dormitories, she was one of a lucky few to have parents there.
They were taken by a small boat to Channel Island. There were a number of buildings, a hospital, and there was a school. Food was scarce. She only remembers eating bread and tea.
Records show many tried to escape. In communities, those with leprosy hid it, with one grandfather cutting off his grandson's finger so authorities wouldn't see the child had the disease.
Leprosy has affected one of this boy's hands. Using this machine, the sister can tell whether the other is affected.
By the 1950s, up to 1 in 10 people in remote Indigenous communities were afflicted.
At that time, there were people from many parts of the territory brought to that island. Tiwi people, people from Maningrida, even parts of West Australia.
Leprosy was introduced to the territory through colonisation in the late 1880s and was left untreated in Indigenous people for decades. The Living Hell Lazaret on Mud Island was the first solution, with the ill abandoned on a sandspit. Opened in 1931, Channel Island was to be the humane solution, holding patients from the territory and northern WA.
There was no adequate medication for leprosy until the late 1940s. That's one of the reasons why so much emphasis was put on isolation of people prior to that time.
The old quarantine site was chosen for its proximity to Darwin and isolation, but the rocky outcrop proved a difficult home, with no water, no farming land, and a serious infestation of flies and biting insects.
I suspect it would have been different if they had not been Indigenous, but it was seen as an Indigenous disease. First of all, a Chinese disease and then an Indigenous one, and they were at the bottom of the heap socially. So nothing much was done.
John Cosson's family is one of the few European families affected. His aunt and grandfather were both sent to Channel Island after testing positive to leprosy in the late 30s.
I get frustrated about it because I think not so much the leprosy part itself, but the price on the family. And I think that the family paid an enormous price for what were antiquated practices.
Images of a white leper child being held in isolation sat uncomfortably with the nation. Madge Gaydon's story made headlines around Australia, putting leprosy treatment in the spotlight and sparking a flood of letters and donations. Clothes, food and even a piano were sent by barge to the island.
She was the only one who seems to have made a creative effort to do something about it. And I think she deserved the publicity, and she probably was instrumental in forcing people to have another look at it.
When you read about it, there was almost a double-edged element in the city. Like there was a feeling of guilt about how they were treating the family, but at the same time, I don't want to physically be involved.
Decades later, and the once barren site is now covered with trees.
The area here is completely overgrown, but you can see the remains, stairs leading up to what was once one of the dormitories that housed children out here at the Commonwealth Leper Colony. Now, the population here surged in the 1950s, with patients numbering 250, 45 of them children.
With an asbestos clean-up almost complete, the ABC has been granted exclusive access to the old Leper Colony site. The Director of Heritage, Michael Wells, wrote up the conservation plan for this site and remains heavily involved.
Okay, so this is a unique feature of the site. This is a chimney that belonged to an Afghan gentleman. He would have built it, and it was so that he could prepare his food according to his Muslim customs.
It's amazing to see that you've still
Yep, and look what we've got here. That's a cup that would have been used by someone on the island, possibly our Afghan gentleman.
Only one of a dozen original huts is still standing, and that's been reconstructed.
What's happened here is they've used original material which they've gathered from nearby, and they've pieced the hut back together, so we can be pretty confident this is what these huts were like.
Rusted bed frames sit exposed, having outlived the shacks they furnished. The old water tank has become a trap for pests.
More than 140 people died and were buried here on Channel Island in the pockets of soft soil just above the high tide mark. Most of the graves are unmarked, but a lucky few have been adorned with upturned beer bottles. These women count friends and family among the dead. While there's no list naming who lived and died at the Commonwealth Hospital, they say a memorial should be installed to honour their story.
In hindsight, we can say it should have been done differently, but you would have thought even in those days that people would have thought of the pain that the stigma that these people already have. Why create more pain for them by removing them from the ones they love? So yes, I think and I hope that the government could do this gracious thing to offer these people an apology.
Letitia Leper